So a week's flown. Once again, time for weekend preview, and it's a juicy one this week because we've got marquee races over both the flats and the jumps as well.
Yeah, so it's the culmination of the jump season with yet another national to try and pick our way through. But then, more interestingly, more importantly, we've got the start of the flat, the real green shoots of the flat. We've had the Craven meeting at Newmarket, which delivered lots of clues, some bubbles burst even at that. And again, we've got the Greenham and the Fred Darling at Newbury, which is sort of essentially the last chance, at least on the track, for a Guineas contender to put their hands up and say, I can go to Newmarket with a chance. So pretty open, both the 1,000, 2,000 guineas, and that really increases the importance of these two trials at Newbury.
I'm tempted to ask you what you think about the Craven, but I'll save that for after Grand National talk. So we'll do jumps first. So it's the Scottish National at Ayr, and unlike last week in the Aintree renewal, where there seemed to be about 3,000 starting points, there's a very good starting point here with Vicente, who's going for a hat-trick.
Yeah, so he's got a track record, literally and figuratively, with this specific race. My issue with Vicente is that at Cheltenham, he lost it completely. His jumping went to pot. His mind wasn't on the job whatsoever, and it was quite a disconcerting performance regards him coming here. Now, obviously, he was a late runner for the national itself, wasn't he, Vicente? Yeah. In view of the testing ground we had there, the drying ground at Ayr will be more in his favour and more to his liking. So we know that he handles conditions, we know that he enjoys this marathon trip, and we know that he enjoys the Scottish air, but he's usually come into this race on a slightly surer footing than this time around, and honestly, it does put me off the way that he was so un-Vicente-like at Cheltenham, and that his jumping, by and large, is a plus point, but it just went to pieces there that day in the Ultima. So I'm a bit worried and a bit lukewarm on Vicente, just because I can't overlook that Cheltenham run completely.
Well, that's one half of the Hemmings challenge. The other one that is well fancied is Vintage Clouds, who was the unluckiest horse of the week last week because he missed out on the Grand National, slightly controversially, if we could say that. But does he have claims here? Is it perhaps a bit quick?
So he was number 4 on the reserve list?
Yeah, he was number 4 on the reserve list, and then the 3 above him proceeded to all get in, and then one of the reserves pulled out, so there ended up being 38 on the day. And I think Mr. Hemmings actually complained on Racing UK that if they'd follow Ireland and had the withdrawals at 9-10 a.m. of the morning, he'd have got a run. So
I mean, there is it's another issue really, that isn't it? It's another discussion to have, but the benefits of allowing horse a late entry, that is almost outweighed by the fact that everything needs to be in place for the National for Saturday to really take hold. So that's by the by. So Vintage Clouds couldn't contest the Grand National in unfortunate circumstances, but he did contest the Welsh National, and that's my sort of way in to the Scottish National, in that I always presumed that this horse was sort of bred and built and designed for marathon running, and as soon as he got to the Welsh National, well, right, watch this now. Finally, he's getting the chance to do what he's absolutely been crying out for. And the Welsh National, although he finished well and finished in the placings, it was quite worrying and quite off-putting even for this to see him really struggle at the point of the race where the heat was turned up, and he went from having a good position to a terrible position, and then his sort of stamina and ability kicked in up the straight when he regained some ground. But the Welsh National was really testing ground around Chepstow and the drying ground at Ayr. I do worry for him with the fact that what we've seen at Vintage Cloud is a little flat spot, or quite a long flat spot actually, but that's going to potentially harm his chances here. So he's one of those horses who, much like Vicente, is really tailor-made for these races, but with Vicente I can't overlook that run, and with Vintage Clouds I still can't overlook and get on my head that Welsh National, where if he did the same at Ayr as he did at Chepstow, then the race would be beyond him on this less testing ground, I think.
Do you think that flat spot tendency is perhaps a pace thing, where he's sort of got one gear that he just keeps going that gear, whereas others have an ability to step up a pace?
I don't know what it is, because he's not a slow horse, and even in the Ultima he was never far away and really stuck to the task well. It's just that there is a flaw in his makeup somewhere. You can't quite put your finger on it, but when you think of the ability and the characteristics and qualities that this horse has got, he should be winning more races. He should be winning better races than he has so far. And I don't know what that flaw in his makeup is, but whatever it is, it does put me off, at least regards looking at the pricing, seeing he's very much towards the top of the betting. So Trevor Hemmings is going to wear in high hopes. I'd have rather less hopes for both his contenders.
Okay, so another one top of the market is one that Dan Barber seems to put up in his previews every single year as a horse to follow in Ballyoptic. And whilst he was ever so slightly never quite hit that heights over hurdles, he's been a very good novice chaser.
Really good novice chaser, and the best novice chase we've had is obviously the RSA, won by Presenting Percy with Monolly in second. Those two were really ahead of the pack, but Ballyoptic ran pretty well for fourth that day. And he is sort of now where Vintage Clouds and Vicente were in the past, in that when they got their chance to run in these sort of races, the nationals, they either grabbed it or they grabbed too much and didn't really click. But Vicente certainly has. Vintage Clouds is still a question, but this fella is just on his way up at the right time, and all of his skill set really are designed for races like the Scottish National. So he's a novice, he's got really strong form, and the suspicion is that he's going to be in his absolute element with this marathon trip up against largely established and horses who are fixed in the handicap. So he, for me, should be clear favourite for the Scottish National based on the strength of that Cheltenham run and the fact that he might well pull out not just a bit but quite a lot more now he faces this test.
We've talked about one hat-trick bid so far in Vicente, but there's another hat-trick bid in the race, not from the horse but from Gordon Elliott, who's chasing a treble.
Of course.
Yeah.
Irish National, Grand National, and now Scottish National.
Potentially won this, it would all go down to Boxing Day or the day after for the Welsh.
I suppose the general principle is one that he was lined up for the Irish National from quite some way out. You could see that from the way he was campaigning. Tiger Roll clearly wasn't he? Because you sort of got the impression from the autumn, the thought, how do we map a route to Liverpool? And that included the cross-country chase, which is a good way, and as he proved with Cause of Causes. And what we know about Fagan is that he has certainly been lined up and primed and ready for this. We haven't seen him since November time at Cheltenham. He finished second that day in a novice chase around Cheltenham, and we were all a bit shoulder shruggy, saying, well, maybe he's not the horse that I thought he might be over fences, but he was behind Black Corton that day, who obviously has done a lot for that form. Black Corton's not in the elite standard, that's why he didn't fire at either Cheltenham or Aintree at those festivals, but he's been a really good yardstick and a really good measurement point for the novices. And Fagan since then has been kept quiet. You get the impression that there hasn't been a setback, it's just been a plan right through, and the owner, Mr. Bartlett, is someone who does love having winners at Ayr as well. So Fagan has clearly been lined up for this, and again, much like Ballyoptic, he's a novice and therefore open to more improvement.
You can go through the list here, and there's quite a few familiar names. Doing Fine, the Young Master, Sizing Tennessee, they've all been there and thereabouts in these sort of staying chases. There's one that is sort of still perhaps a new kid on the block in Gold Present, who's looked a progressive staying chaser.
So he's another one who was booked for the Grand National and taken out 48 hours or 24 hours before, but it was purposeful, wasn't it? It wasn't a setback. They just said, well, this ground's not really for him, especially with, there was a slight stamina doubt with him. He ran in the Ultima along with Vicente, who fell, along with Vintage Clouds, who was ahead of Gold Present. I think Gold Present burst a blood vessel that day, and that's why he was pulled up sharply. Previous form strong. He's just got a bit of a mountain to climb in terms of the handicap, because you get the impression with him that he's done all of his improving up to now, and there's obviously great faith in Nicky Henderson that he clearly thinks he's a national horse to have entered him up until late on in the Grand National itself, and to bring him straight back and point him towards Ayr. So I've just got a slight stamina doubt with Gold Present in that he's always looked as much speed as stamina. He's always got a bit of class about him. I've always thought that he's really a 3-miler through and through, rather than actual national winner or runner. I do think that the one bet I've had so far is that horse you mentioned. That when we've been in the horse who've been there and doing that, but Doing Fine is. He's still got unfinished business regarding these sort of races. He's running 2 London Nationals. London Nationals, another national to throw in the mix. He's run a Sandown, the London National. Finished 2nd last season, finished 4th this season. But he was just had too much to do when he was 4th this season. And since then, he's been kept fresh for this specific day. The drying ground's in his favour, the test is clearly in his favour. And Neil Mulholland, who was a bit quiet in midwinter, he's really turned the corner. He's had 7 winners so far in April alone. Noel Feely back on is a plus. And I think they're doing fine, even though he's not a novice. He's still got that feel of a horse who's got some unfinished business regards this specific type of race. So I think the Ballyoptic should be favoured based on his profile. But I think they're doing fine is the one in the top half dozen in the betting who I can see gathering momentum, gathering traction on the day itself. And I wouldn't be surprised if a bit of a gamble developed on doing fine, because he's got exactly the right profile that I look for in a Scottish national horse.
Okay, doing fine there, and I must say I'm a big fan of these regional nationals that pop up through the season. I think the North Yorkshire one's a favourite one at Catterick.
That's the best one, isn't it? There's a Durham National at Sedgefield as well.
The Durham National. Is there a Northumberland one at Hexham? Am I making that up?
No, there is.
Yeah. Oh, they're the races to be saving in the season, not the Grand National.
Rasda Marie holds the record, I think, for most number of nationals contested.
Even in Ireland, there's like Leinster, Kerry.
Well, just very briefly, have you got what price is a horse called Glencairn View on the national list?
In the national itself,
the Scottish national Glencairn View.
20 to 1 best price, more like 16.
Just bring him in because we talked about regional nationals. He was 3rd in the Leinster National this season behind Pair of Brown Eyes. But he's a novice, like Ballyoptic, and either side of that 3rd in the National, he's won good novice handicaps, and he's one potential horse who he could be a snowball horse in the day in the people spot. Wait and look at this horse, improving form, already tried and tested in a national of sorts. It's just that depends on how soft the ground is by the Saturday, because he's been in his element in the mud. But another horse, just with that national background, who's a bit different. But that's air.
Yeah, I've got a feeling that Tiger Roll won the Leinster National
years
ago.
Of them. Munster National.
Yeah.
I think. But yeah, he won a variation of the National. It's a good warm-up point.
My Irish geography goes out the window past Dublin and Belfast, really.
Yeah, your 2 drinking points.
So, over to the flat, and are we going to quickly run through all the ITV races? Is that all?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So, start off with the John Porter Stakes, which is confusing because they all have Dubai Duty Free in front of them tomorrow. And it's headed here by a horse who, for quite a while in the season, looked like a serious ledger prospect in Defoe. But then, when the time came, disappointed a bit on the day.
Yeah, he was disappointing on the day. I don't quite know why. He just clearly wasn't himself, because the Defoe that turned up at Doncaster wasn't the Defoe we'd seen right through the season. But he was only 6 to 1 on the day for the St Ledger, and it was a really strong St Ledger when you think of the field that we had: Capri, Crystal Ocean, Stradivarius, an exceptionally strong St Ledger. So for him to be only 6 to 1 in that sort of company, it tells you everything that Defoe did beforehand, which included a rise through the ranks, and every time he came to the track he looked better. There was new dimensions on him. So he fluffed his lines a bit on the bigger stage, but I think that John Porter's at his mercy, absolutely at his mercy when you consider the rest of the field. So just quickly run through the others in the field.
Call to Mind.
So Call to Mind, actually, on his way up Defoe at Hamilton, he finished 3 or 4 lengths ahead of Call to Mind. And even though Call to Mind improved a bit, he never reduced that deficit to Defoe in form terms. So against Call to Mind, he's already got 1 verdict, and you can categorically say that's a better horse than him.
Danehill Kodiak.
Yeah, I mean, Danehill Kodiak, he wasn't flattered and he wasn't lucky, but everything that could have gone right did go right when he won his races at the back end, dictated. Other horses didn't fire, softish ground really suited him, so I don't think he's really in the class of Defoe.
And then you've got Autocratic.
He's disappointing this year, isn't he, Autocratic? He finished 2nd at Kempton last time, but still not the Autocratic that we saw at the Brigadier Gerard at the start of last season. So big question marks about him.
And the last 2 are big prices. What about Carlo and TT McPhee?
Well, it's pretty soft ground at Newbury, but not soft enough to bring What About Carlo into it in this company. And TT McPhee is a bit of a glorified handicapper in this. So the price of it's about 7 to 4, 6 to 4 even Defoe. That means if you ran this race 10 times, he'd win at 4 based on what we know. I think he'd probably win at 6 or 7. Honestly, I think that Defoe will and should be nearer even money, and I think that if you want one horse to to kickstart your weekend, I think that Defoe is a shoe-in for this John Porter. We know that Roger Varian has them ready to go first time up. We've seen that already several times over this season. I think Defoe's just the best horse, and I think the reason why he is 6-4, 7-4 is sort of over-focusing on that ledger. Don't look at that, concentrate on all the progress that got him to the St. Ledger and only 6-1, and I wouldn't be surprised if he went off odds on Nick for this.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
I think he could be Jermaine Mann.
Jermaine Mann, yeah.
Yeah.
A week never passes without a terrible pun that limps its way onto centre screen from Nick. Jermaine Mann.
You know, if you're watching the stream now, you can actually, about 5 or 10 seconds ago, see me smirk as I come up with that in my head. Anyway, it's the Fred Darling Stakes up next.
Fred Darling.
Yeah, another Dubai duty-free name, and it's a 1,000 guineas trial. This 3-year-old fillies, and Gavota's head of the market. She's got some really solid group form.
Yeah. So, important point to make is that it's not just one race in itself. It's also a Guineas trial. We had the Guineas trial, the Nell Gwyn through the week, which was won by Soliloquy for Godolphin, but second was Alchan Order. Now, Alchan Order won the Oh So Sharp Stakes, and second was this Gavota. So there's a really strong line between the Nell Gwyn and this Fred Darling. It's called the Fred Darling, isn't it?
Yeah, registered as the Fred Darling Stakes, but it's
Dubai duty-free stakes. Yeah, we're going to call it the Fred Darling. And Gavota ran really well to be second to Alchan Order that day. So it's just a line in to say that we've got a direct comparison between the Nell Gwyn and this through that Oh So Sharp, because the winner went that way and finished second to Nell Gwyn. The runner-up is coming to the Fred Darling, some say Dubai duty-free. But either way, Gavota is the standard setter, the one to beat. The other thing with her is that her form at the minute, the 2-year-old form, is the best amongst this bunch, and she's also a really good type physically. We call her tall in a physical description, and we said almost every time she came to the track last year that she's a 3-year-old in the making. She's got the sort of size and shape of a better 3-year-old. So Gavota, it's hers to lose as far as this is concerned. Obviously, we're a bit treading carefully with these races where we've got reappearing 3-year-olds who could have changed in make or shape or form right through the winter. But from what we know, Gavota's in pole position to win this, and we'll hopefully get a good line with the other trial, the Nell Gwyn, through Alchan Order.
Yeah. Up next is the Greenham, which is another trial for the Guineas, this time the 2,000 guineas. And we've got one here right at the top of the market in Expert Eye, who we've already seen two sides to, because he was so scintillating in winning the Vintage Stakes at Goodwood, but then was a really disappointment really in the Dewhurst.
I never know which is the good one out of Jekyll and Hyde.
Oh, I've no idea. I've never.
Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I think Dr. Jekyll was the good one, but yeah, the Dr. Jekyll, if that was the good one, was a Goodwood winner, because that was still one of, if not the best 2-year-old performances of the whole year. The way that he ran away from a strong field at Goodwood, and we all thought then, wow, this is something out of the ordinary. That's the reason why he was 4-7 going to the Dewhurst, even with the Ballyoptic battalions that Aidan sent over. There was never any lost faith in Expert Eye between Goodwood and Newmarket, but it all went wrong at Newmarket. And the reason it all went wrong was, well, the vets found that he was lame afterwards, or the vet reported that he was lame, but obviously we're not saying the vet's wrong, but that there was other things at play. And number one is that the horse was completely like a crazy Mustang, didn't settle whatsoever. So you've got to put yourself in the shoes of Sir Michael Stout, who all of a sudden, his prized hope, has blotted his copybook, markedly so, and he's got a full winter to put that right, to calm him down, to bring out the Expert Eye that we all saw at Goodwood. So it's a really important day for him in terms of, he's at the crossroads in his career, in that he was so uncontrollable almost at Newmarket, that's the reason he finished last, that it's very hard to support him in cash terms anyway, coming back here. So it's a very difficult race to talk about from a betting point of view, because it's only Expert Eye that will decide which way this goes. If he settles and relaxes, then nothing is in his league. If he hasn't relaxed, and obviously coming back fresh and fizzy and free is going to be a tricky day for him, and for Ryan Moore, who Sir Michael Stout has called up. So you get the impression that these two will have done plenty of homework but still coming to the track on a big day, it's going to be D-Day for Expert Eye. I think that probably the way to play it is that if you are still a believer in Expert Eye, back him now for the Guineas, because if he settles, he'll win the Greenham and he'll win it well, and suddenly he'll be clear favourite for the Guineas. So that is probably a way to play it without having to dive in at odds on. But it's just in my mind that I certainly couldn't back him at odds on, given what he did at Newmarket in the Dewhurst.
Yeah, we've seen so far, we saw it in the Craven yesterday actually, Roaring Lion, a really well thought of 2-year-old, disappoint on his first appearance. Is there a danger of that happening with Expert Eye? But at the same time I look down the field and it doesn't look the strongest.
No, I mean the point is that it's Expert Eye's, the race completely revolves around him. If he settles, if he allows himself to show his ability, then he'll win by 6 or 7 lengths. But you can't overlook what he did in the Dewhurst, and if he does get revved up again, coming back first time as a 3-year-old, then he will lose the race and something else will step up. And to be honest, if I was having a bet now, just obviously playing the market and playing the situation rather than what I think of the horses, Hey Gaman would be the one, because he's almost the antidote to Expert Eye in that he's so straightforward, so genuine. We've seen him several times as a 2-year-old in good races, including at this track, where he's just been pointed out in front and proved very hard to catch. Now, the Expert Eye at Goodwood would just run by him a furlong out, but if the Expert Eye from the Dewhurst who refuses to settle, then suddenly it's game on for any horse in here. But Hey Gaman, with that style and with his ability, he would be the one now who you'd say, you know, when people say the value pick, it's playing on the circumstances, but Hey Gaman makes good sense if you're going to play this particular race. If you fancy Expert Eye, that's probably a good way to do it, to back him for the Guineas and hope that he settles, because the more that he settles, the more that your anti-post bet on the Guineas for him is going to be looking good.
We'll touch on the Guineas then quickly. We've seen a couple of them already now. We saw Gustav Klimt last week.
That's right.
He's the 3-1 favourite. I wrote down the market leaders. We saw Massar, of course, he's 7-1, and then you've got Saxon Warrior at 11-2 and Ellicam at 7-1 as well. Yeah. Is it a wide open Guineas?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
very different Guineas. Normally, there's an Aidan O'Brien horse who's 6-4 favourite through the winter, who goes off of 4-5, and who people like me say, oh, I'm not sure he's got the form to be 4-5, and they just win anyway because it's trained by Aidan O'Brien. But it's a very different set of circumstances here, in that we've had, even sort of in the last, since the end of the 2-year-old campaign on turf, we've probably had 4 or 5 different favourites for this race, which reflects that nobody really knows who the best horse is out there. There's very much a Guineas up for grabs. Roaring Lions blotted his copybook. The vibes aren't that good with Saxon Warrior when you consider that by now they've had that big home trial in the Ballydoyle, whereby normally you wake up one morning, there's suddenly a horse who's much shorter in the betting, and it's all because of this private trial. But Saxon Warrior has been usurped by Gustav Klimt, who's come out, wasn't impressive, wasn't flashy, but it was very much a means to an end for him. Don't forget that he had to sit out the second half of last season with a slight injury. That's why he's up and running early. And I just watched that back again from Leopardstown last week, and Ryan Moore he rode him as if it was a piece of work, and it was just a matter of getting the job done in the end. And he was impressive, and he was brilliant at Newmarket to get out of trouble in the Superlative last year.
Yeah, I was just about to mention that, because it was a sensational run. Yeah, but does that sort of run sort of wary you, is make a bit wary as well, because he got into all sorts of trouble that day?
Yeah, he found all sorts of trouble. One thing we know about Gustav Klimt is that he stays a mile, because he ran a mile in the 7 furlong Superlative. By the time that he went backwards, left, pushed all over the rail, and somehow still managed to win. If we had trackers, which is that American system underground underneath the track, which works out exactly how far each horse is covered, you'd be staggered by what he was able to do that day. So suddenly he's in pole position, but without really sticking his hand up to say, yeah, I've really improved this year. That's why the Greenham's important, and that's why Massar's win, which has left us all scratching our heads. I mean, I talked to the guys who do the ratings, the guys who do the sectional time data, the guys who do the overall time figures, and we're all between us a bit scratching our heads as to what the performance is worth, because the field finished so strung out, and because of the other elements, like he had the run of the race, he dictated. There's a suspicion that he was really fitter than anything else because he went out to Dubai and came back and looked great. So loads of different things, but it also means, Nick, that those we haven't seen this year, besides Expert Eye and who are going straight for Newmarket, you suddenly see them in a different light. And even though he wouldn't tell us who he was working with, Mark Johnston had a bit of a twinkle in his eye and was certainly satisfied with El Arkham, the Frankel colt, with his preparation. So it's a fascinating Guineas, this. But it's still the case of if Expert Eye settles the race in strides, then he's going to be your 9-4 favourite for the Guineas.
So a race that revolves around Expert Eye, and we'll close with...
I might have talked myself into a bet there.
Possibly. What?
Expert Eye.
In the Guineas, right?
Yeah, in the Guineas.
He's 8-1 at the moment.
Yeah.
So it'd be at least half that price tomorrow, you'd think he'd be won well.
Yeah. Yeah, because you couldn't back him at 4-6 or something. What was he for the Greenham itself?
At the minute, yeah, he's anything from about 11-8 on to, well, there's tips on, but he won't be that tomorrow. Tips on, is that a thing?
Yeah, it's a real thing. I haven't heard someone under 50s use the phrase tips on.
That's from listening to John McCurry, I think.
But I think that I might have that bet. I might strike that bet. You only strike bets, don't you? The only things you strike are bets and medallions. Medallions get struck.
All I can think is baseball, strike out.
Strike out, you can strike out in baseball. But yeah, so if you back Expert Eye at 8-1, you don't have to have much on to win a good amount, and you just have to take your medicine if he does if he repeats his terrible trick from the Dewhurst. But if after a furlong he's tanking along under Ryan Moore just nicely behind the pace, then there's going to be a real all-out scramble to get on him for the Guineas, because he's got £6 in hand of this field, this Greenham field as things stand. He's still got a Timeform P. We still got the impression that, you can't base things on Dewhurst. You've got to consider the first two performances, which was screened that he might be a superstar. So yeah, I think that might be a good bet. That
worth noting as well. Am I right in thinking was he an odds-on favourite for the Dewhurst, or was he very short?
Oh yeah, 4-7, something like that. Up the arm, 5, 4, 6, 4, 7 to 4.
Oh, I've no idea.
He was shorter than tips on though.
Tips on, yeah. I'm not very good at my tic-tac stuff.
No, it's a lost art. No tic-tac.
Yeah. Carpet and double carpet.
Yeah.
I know those 3s and 33s and. Yeah, it's John McCurry's fault, that, from Channel 4.
Of all the John McCurry's destructive nature, getting you to say tips on is perhaps the most staggering achievement in his whole career.
Right, so we'll finish off with the Spring Cup, which I must say, I was looking at the previous winners. I'd forgotten all about in 2016. He was run at Chelmsford. There was 7 runners. God. I was like, good, 7 runners in the Spring Cup. Yeah, and
I forgot about that.
Yeah, I'd forgotten all about it. And Gabriel's Kaka won it for a second time. But yeah, it's one of the strange quirks of racing. It's far more competitive tomorrow. 25 going to post. And one thing I always think about these sorts of races at this time of the season, it isn't always perhaps the best horse in the race that wins, but the one that's best prepared.
Yeah, good point to make. I mean, we could talk for 20 minutes. Nobody wants us to talk for 20 minutes about the Spring Cup. But I have got one horse out of however many runners, 20 plus
25
runners,
at the moment, yeah,
that I just wrote down, and it's to do with what you said, preparation. Now, George William is the horse in question. He finished 4th in this race last year, and he kept on going up. A few little drop-off points along the way, but by and large his form kept going up. So much so that he got qualified for Dubai and he went out to Maidan for a couple of big handicaps out there. Now, for whatever the reason, he just never adjusted to either the climate or the conditions or the circumstances of racing in Dubai. Did okay the first run, did badly the second run. But what it's given him is some winter sun. Now, couple the Dubai sun with the fact that Richard Hannon's early form is really strong, isn't it? All his horses are running really well. And I think that George Williams a little bit overlooked in the market. He's not one of those sexy horses who's lightly raced and coming through like Aflac, like Takdir, who was the short price for the Spring Mile at Doncaster, the Consolation Lincoln. You got your sexy horse at the top, George William. He's a bit more hardened, but he's really good in this sort of straight track, big field environment. He's 4th in the race last year, unlucky not to finish 2nd, unlucky perhaps not to push Banksy. But I'm really interested by this sort of thread of wintering, at least for some time, out in Dubai, which potentially might have given him an advantage, and then you bring him back to a stable that's absolutely flying in the early part of the season. And it's easy to make a case for him because he's got the sort of big field form, he's got exactly this race form, he represents a stable that's flying, and he's had that winter sun, so I suspect that he might look a bit different to most of the rest in the paddock at Newbury tomorrow, and that there might be a gleam on his coat that the others are a bit envious of because he's been out in Dubai. So a fascinating horse for me, and I think he's overpriced in a field where naturally they're drawn a bit more towards the lighter race, low mileage horses.
Pardon if he is named after a famous artist or whatever, but I'm always a big fan of horses named after regular blokes' names. We've got two in here as well, Tony Curtis.
Well, Tony Curtis is a bit of a famous actor, I don't know what George William did against, although that's just two first names put together, isn't it? They say never trust a man with two first names, but we can trust George William as a racehorse because he's really dependable in this sort of scenario.
And 25 to 1, not bad.
Not bad.
Smash him. Thanks for that, Jamie.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, everyone. Good luck this weekend.
Oh, I've made a pig's ear.
What's your fault?
Yeah, fell over.